Hi, welcome to How to Be a Humane Leader Without Losing Your Job. Dive deep into humane leadership crafted for today's fast-paced business world. Don't miss out our weekly YouTube live sessions every Thursday at 8:10 a.m. Central Time, 10:10 a.m. Eastern Time, where we engage and tackle pressing leadership topics. Listen to our podcast on all major streaming platforms and join us as we explore the essence of humane leadership in today's dynamic business landscape. I'm the host, Roberto Torres, a seasoned startup engineering leader, alongside Chris Ollerton, a Fortune 100 IT leader. Today, we will discuss how a humane leader will have better results than an autocratic leader. Hello, sir. How have you been?
Very good, Roberto. I'm glad to be here.
Great, man. I'm I'm grateful that you are here. And today's topic is because 2 weeks ago, well, a couple of weeks ago, an autocratic leader and I engaged into a discussion. And this discussion was, he told me that as he pushed people, he didn't lead them. He pushed people, he would have better results than a humane leader. And I totally disagree. So I would ask you, do you think that an autocratic leader will have better results than a humane leader?
That is a very loaded question. And in general, I would say you're right, as always, because you and I are really smart people. But I can always argue both sides of any argument. And I think the answer is it depends. You and I both come from an IT background. There's greatly different types of companies, but similar kinds of work, at least in the same class, right? It's in information technology. So in general, I would say autocratic work definitely does not work in that space. Now,
Yeah.
if we were all assembly line workers and there was very specific things you do, you didn't want any deviation in how it was done. You wanted it 6 sigma to the max. You're on the assembly line at the bolt needs to be turned exactly to this torque. Then I think autocratic leadership is probably going to be more productive. But in general, I'm on your side with this argument. But for the point of our discussion, I'll try and be on the other side once in a while.
Nice. Well, you give me a different perspective than the one that I thought that we will be talking about. Yeah, indeed. If we were talking about an assembly line, it might, it might work being an autocratic leader because the people within that line wouldn't have to think thoroughly about the activity, the tasks they are doing. They're more about repetitive tasks that they had to do and to comply and to reach maybe, I don't know, a number of automobiles or number of mobile phones to do it. It's a very interesting perspective. But since you and I are in IT, what do you think about this? Maybe an autocratic leader will have better results in an IT team than a human leader?
Definitely not. I can't think of many cases where it could be. I mean, maybe in the short run, you need something done by Friday, and today's Thursday, and you're going to pound on them. Maybe, but in general, at least in the areas of IT where I've worked in, you want creativity, you want free thinking ideas, you want your employees to bring suggestions to you and be creative about how you're solving problems and creative solutions to the application you're creating or whatever it is. And so autocratic leadership takes all the creativity away from your team. It takes all their willingness, and in my opinion, would crush their spirits so that they won't even be willing to bring you suggestions and new creative ideas that you didn't think of. So again, I think for the roles that you and I have had, you would never want to be that autocratic leader. If you're demanding on people, you're making all the decisions, you don't want to hear their input, then why'd you hire them? I mean, our jobs are to be creative.
Yeah, indeed. And one thing is that I think that another tragic leader will take away, besides the freedom and independence of a team, it would take away also the willingness of be yourself, or maybe to be motivated to reach a goal. If I'm not saying that at first, but if it's constantly nagging about you have to do it this way, and you have to do it really fast, and you have to, it will take away that willingness to work for this guy or for this lady, and to be more productive. It's like a different view. It's like if you switch cameras and then you see something different.
It's exactly like that, and I think, to my first point, it's what do you really want out of the team? And there are many different leadership styles, and you may apply those styles at different times. But if you're picking, if we're going to just pick one, methodology, let's say, and you're going to be the autocratic leader in the world of IT, I certainly can't think of many times that that's going to be the most successful situation in the long term. Again, in the short term, maybe, but I mean, if you're a finance leader, if you're an accounting leader, you're in marketing, any of these jobs where you want people to be working independently, making decisions and getting the job done, maybe coming to you with creative solutions that you hadn't thought of before to make things more efficient. An autocratic leader is just going to crush your team spirit more than anything. That's the thing that I think about it is that style of leadership just would crush my spirit to contribute, would crush my spirit to be creative.
Oh yeah, and I think that's why some people decides to quit a job, because of the leader or the boss, not about the situations. And I was thinking when you mentioned finance, marketing, I think people in sales also have, most of the people in sales have autocratic leader, because you have to reach the target. You have to, you must be obliged to reach it and comply with it. And I think that's something that a humane leader should be better at that. I'm not in sales. I've been in a very few jobs in something related to sales, or maybe supporting sales. But I think that someone in a department where you have a constant communication with your team, they must feel motivated to reach those numbers. And the thing with I think the thing with an autocratic leader is that they don't communicate until it's necessary. And we humane leaders communicate as often as possible to do it. And that helps us, because we have managers, and in all the positions that we had. And with all these managers, what we require is to have constant communication, because otherwise we will be lost. So I think that's the difference. Let me tell you something real quick. I had a COO which I reported to, and he was an autocratic leader, and he was one of the worst bosses that I had in my life. What I did was to protect my team from this guy, but it was something at some moments in my life within that company that I said, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be with this guy. But I knew if I left, my team will felt lonely, without a true leadership team, true leadership manager. And I decided to stick around a little while until I could find a solution to be in that company.
Yeah, and there may be different stages in your life or different people's personalities themselves. So let's look at it from the employees, the team members' perspective. There are certainly some people, their personality, they don't really want to make decisions. They would prefer to come to work, be told what to do it, then finish it, turn around and leave, and not have to work in a creative or in a demanding situation where they have to constantly come up with new solutions for new problems. The newer problems arise every day, that kind of thing. So I'm not, again, like my example, I'm saying that in general, I don't believe that in our world of IT that type of leadership is going to be very successful. But there might be other organizations, and there may be team members who feel more comfortable working in a role where they just don't need to do some of those things, and that boss takes on that burden. He makes all the decisions, or she makes all those decisions. They're accountable for them, right? So the employee and the team don't get in trouble when something goes incorrectly, because there's two sides to that argument. If I'm the employee, I've got a very open boss who lets me make the decisions and does things, then I also bear some responsibility when things don't go right. But if I have an autocratic leader who told me exactly where he wanted me to put the shovel, and the shovel hits the power line, it's the boss's fault, not mine. That is a boss. An autocratic leader is absolutely a boss, but the fact that I hit the power line, that's the boss's fault, not mine. I just pushed the shovel.
Yeah, that's a different perspective that I haven't seen, because I assume that 100% of people require or wanted to have a human leaders to be above them. But I think it's not. I think there are some people that would say, I don't care. Either it's an autocratic or a humane, I don't care. I want to do my job. Or there could be people who requires an autocratic leader, the one who is not in him, not in her, which is constantly, excuse me, pushing, because they know they won't work or they won't be have a high performance if they're being soft to them. I think that's an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, try and think about every person you know, not the people you work with. And so sometimes when we're addressing things as humane leaders, we want to try and put everybody and making them, in general, sometimes think that they're more like us from a personality perspective. I would always prefer a humane leader over an autocratic leader, personally. But that's just it. It's personally. There are people who prefer the kind of work that they're in because they don't have to go to work and make any decisions. They just don't want to. That's just not their personality. So there could be situations where people prefer an autocratic leader to a degree. And lots of times when I think autocratic leader, I think a mean leader, an angry leader. And I don't think people prefer an angry leader over a humane leader. I think that if they're in a role where where autocratic leadership is most appropriate, and let's just pick on assembly line as the example, stick with that example. I think they would prefer a humane level of autocratic leadership. In other words, you need to put out so many widgets, build so many phones per hour. And that's going to be very autocratic about how the boss manages that. But I'm sure that employee would prefer that do that humanely in such a way that if I'm struggling to meet the quota that I'm supposed to do, be the humane leader and help coach the employee. Are there some steps that they're doing wrong and having to reverse on the assembly line and then go forward again, and that's why they can't meet the quota? Or is there a technique that the employee hasn't learned, and therefore your autocratic leadership, it can be given humanely to help them be more productive and meet the targets that the autocratic leader demands? So again, I can always pretty much argue any side of the argument you give me most of the time. I mean, I'm not a philosopher, so I'm sure you could give me something that I just can't think of the other side that's positive. But, you know, there are going to be situations where sometimes even in a very humane leadership role, you might have to be autocratic about some things in the job, and just try and approach that in a humane way. Hey, team, normally we need to do certain X and Y, but this time this absolutely has to be done by Friday. And so we can't take any chances, and we absolutely have to do it this way. So now, me, the humane leader, is now being very autocratic about exactly how I want you to do it, because if it doesn't get done by Friday, it's all on me and I'm fired. Okay, but do a very humane job of explaining that to your team and why you don't want to hear their 18 other angles and decisions on how to do it. And we don't have time to experiment for 24 hours and do it. We got 24 hours to finish the whole thing. So, sometimes that kind of autocratic leadership might be required. But again, I think it's very short-term things. It's not things where we're trying to solve this problem. We got the next year, and I'm going to demand how you do it. You're probably not going to get the results you want in that situation.
Oh, yeah. True to you, adding to your words, it is, if you want to have a team that is going to last a long term of time, you require a humane leader. Otherwise, stick with an autocratic leader, which, by the way, might work for certain situations, as you mentioned in the assembly line. But I was thinking maybe for an engineering team or for an IT team, that you will require to maybe level up, go to the ceiling of the performance if a leader with that team is not making things right. Maybe switching that guy temporarily. I will take you away for 3 months, 6 months, and I will put this guy and I will get you into that team again. I think it might rise the people, or it might level up that performance. I think it should work that way. But in the end, I wouldn't want my team to have an autocratic leader unless I'm not doing my job, unless I'm not providing results, unless it is declining in performance. I think it will be that way because in the end, results are what we are measured by. It's nothing related to other things. So if we are creating business application, mobile or web, it's how fast can you do it without bots and have the highest quality. We're not measured by anything by results. And I think that, as you mentioned, an autocratic leader might work for certain situations, and a humane leader might not work for those. So it's like a balance.
Yeah, you definitely, have to always consider the unique situation you're in as the leader, and you might do things wrong. The most important thing that the humane leader does is, as they're trying to solve the problem and meet the deadline, and you're experimenting with different techniques with your team and suggestions and brainstorming methods and all the different things that you can do as a leader, you're continuing to evaluate those, and you're discarding the ones that are not working, and you try and leverage the things that are working and leverage them more. And the humane leader is constantly listening for that feedback. The autocratic leader thinks they're right, doesn't care about the feedback from the team, might be going off the edge of a cliff with their development strategy. And even though the team is screaming, you're going off the cliff. Nope. I'm the autocratic leader. I'm not going to rethink anything. I'm not going to take any other opinions. I'm just making the decisions and we're going. Well, you're probably, most of the time in those kind of creative environments that in general, again, maybe once in a while it works, but in general, I'd say that's going to fail 99% of the time.
Oh, yeah, let me tell you that I was thinking that maybe an autocratic leader would work in a startup which are trying to aim user growth and ain't reaching it. So let's say, for instance, that we have a runway of 3 months. A human leader might not reach those numbers. An autocratic leader might do it. So I think that in that situation, it would, for the survival of the startup, it will be nice, or it will be a must to have an autocratic leader in that situation.
Right, because again, and to me, kind of that common thread through that was how much time do you have? Do you have a limited amount of time, and now and let's just suppose that the leader has much more experience than the other team members too. If they're all close to the same amount of experience, maybe the humane leader just has a little bit of extra management experience. You got to be more humane because you need more contributions from everyone. But in the role that you're talking about, where you got just a 3-month runway, the leader's got 10 more years of experience than everybody else on the team. Yeah, autocratic leadership where look, I've got the vision. I know it will work. I just don't have the horsepower to do all the steps myself. So my team of 10, I'm dividing up what I know will work across the 10 to get it done in the 3 months. And you bet on the autocratic leader for that. However, I bet you that team's not together 4 years from now. They're not around for revision 4 of that application.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it happened to me when I got into a startup. They had an autocratic leader in which they had to reach certain numbers. And when they reach it, they began hiring people, they hired me. And the people, the team members that I had told me that their previous manager was so obtuse, that he was so bad, that they didn't want to work with him anymore. And he was in another department, which he made that department the same. But I think with a good reason, business good reason, that might work. I think that could work.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And again, I think the best leader combines a lot of different techniques, and sometimes autocratic leadership is part of that. The humane part, if you read all the different management books, there's not an official humane leadership style. I think what the humane leadership is taking a blend of all those things and constantly trying to recognize what's working, what's not working, and apply it in that situation with that whole team, but also that individual. Because even within the team, if you're applying certain techniques, some of your team members may need more autocratic time than some of the other team members. Meaning, that perhaps you have a team member who, for their own personality and whatever, they need more detailed instruction and guidance. So you may be a bit more autocratic with that particular team member versus the other 9. So the humane leader, I think, we've never really kind of defined every aspect that we think of a humane leader. But to me, part of it is you're introspective as a humane leader, and you're reflecting back and you're thinking about what worked well, what should I do different, what will make the team most effective, what techniques should I use. And some of it is thinking about the team as a whole, and some of it is thinking about each individual of the team. So how do I get the best results and coach that employee to be the best that they can be? And sometimes some of those techniques for that individual could be more autocratic than all the other team members. Maybe all the other team members don't need it at all, and this one team member really needs things spelled out for them until they mature and get better at doing things and task management and time management on their own. So maybe, the humane leader is really somebody who applies all leadership techniques to a different degree at different times with different people.
Wow, man, you can imagine. I learned a lot in this podcast we created with you, but today has been amazing because you have shown me a different perspective than the one that I had. When I began this discussion with this autocratic leader a couple of weeks ago, I was, riding my horse and saying, I'm the good guy, he's the bad guy. But when you mention this, it isn't. We had to be autocratic at certain times and maybe with different people, different teams, but we require to have at least something like that kind of that leadership style, depending on the situation. And it is a different perspective. It's like if we switch cameras in the middle of the podcast. Amazing.
It is amazing. And you can still make it work.
Yeah, indeed.
The humane leader can make it work.
Indeed. Well, I think, Chris, with this, we could end this podcast. It has been so valuable.
Excellent. I'm glad you enjoyed the conversation. I hope our audience did too. I love talking to you every week. Let's